Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Robert Plunkett, and I'm a former member of the United States Army, and I served in the famous 7th Cavalry Regiment, 1st Cav Division, in the occupation of Japan at the end of World War II. And I served from 1946 and 1947. I was in, officially, the war did not end until almost a year after they signed the treaty in Tokyo Harbor. But they recruited a number of us. I enlisted because I was faced with being drafted. And so I went to Chicago that summer after I graduated. When I got back, all my buddies had gone into service. So I went ahead and enlisted. And they sent me off. I was sworn in at Lowry Air Force Base in Denver, Colorado, which is where I grew up. And then they sent me to Fort Riley, Kansas for my reception center. And we were out getting all of our equipment and the supplies and everything were provided us then. They packed up our civilian clothes and sent them home. And I spent a few days there. Then they shipped us out to Fort Knox, Kentucky. Now the interesting thing about that trip is that I traveled on a troop train from Kansas to Fort Knox in Louisville. And you don't see those anymore, but they were basically reconverted cattle cars. We had one Pullman car on that train. So we got to Kansas City that night. They're bedding us down, and I happened to luck out and I got a lower berth all to myself, all the way from Kansas City to St. Louis. And then it's very unique because it's just strange to have that many guys aboard a train. And we just chugged through the United States to get down to Fort Knox. So you go through Fort Knox, Kentucky, you come out believing one guy, and that's General Patton. Because we came out of there as armored, and armored we were. And we were very proud of that heritage with Patton. Well, I was 13 then, and I grew up in Inglewood, Colorado. And I can remember the newspaper, because I used to deliver newspapers. I used to stand in the street corner hollering extra, extra, selling them 5 cents a newspaper. Yeah, I was 13 when it happened. And we could not believe that the Japanese had done that to us. The interesting thing, where I grew up in Inglewood, we had a lot of Japanese, the Japanese truck farmers. So I went to school, a lot of them, Nisis. And a lot of people don't realize, but during World War II, we organized a whole division made up of Japanese, and they served in the European. They did a lot of fighting in Italy and made quite a name for themselves. So, and I think the thing about it is the Japanese, when they hit Pearl Harbor, I still remember one of the admirals said, be cautious because maybe we've just awakened the giant. I view the giant as, the United States is not just one big bunch of big cities. The United States is a bunch of small towns, 15, 20 miles apart from each other. And that's the backbone of this country. The day you get them riled up is the day you better look out. With Fort Knox, they put us through an 8-week training session because they were in a hurry to get us overseas to replace the veterans who were coming home. So I had a very intensive basic in Fort Knox. They trained us as a reconnaissance car troopman. That's kind of like a tank with wheels. And they taught us how to drive 2.5-ton trucks, how to maintain an M7 armored car. We had gunnery. We had a 37mm cannon on it, and also 30 caliber machine guns. And then we were qualified with the M1 rifle. And so we had all that training plus radio. So it was pretty intensive training. Then they shipped us out overseas. I had a delay en route going from Fort Knox to San Francisco, California, up to Pittsburgh, California. They kept us there for about 3 days, and then they shipped us out. We left the camp, we marched down to the pier in Pittsburgh with all of our equipment, got aboard ferry boats, brought us down the channel down to just this side of Alcatraz in San Francisco Bay, and there we boarded the USS Admiral Sims. And I want to show you this point just to show you how big this ship was. It was the largest troop transport in the United States at that time. Maybe you can see it from here. And they put 5,000 of us aboard that ship. We sailed from San Francisco up to Pearl Harbor. We were in Pearl Harbor for 3 days where we took on some additional troops. Then we went from there to the South Pacific. From the South Pacific up to the Yellow Sea into Seoul, just below Seoul, Korea. And my first day out, we had rough seas from San Francisco. It's rather interesting because when you're on one of those troop transports, they don't sit you. You get your mess kit, go through the slough, then you stand at this table to eat. So I went through, they gave me my toast, scrambled eggs, which were the old hydrated eggs, and coffee, the canned bacon, and an apple. I got on my train, I went over and set it down. While just sitting it down, the guy comes to the other side, proceeds to set this down, and he proceeds to throw up all over his mess tray plus mine. I said, forget it. So the next morning I said, that's it. I went through, I said, give me my toast, put my eggs on top of that, put my bacon on top of that, put my other piece of toast on top of that, took my apple, my coffee, I went topside. That's where I ate my meals. The living quarters aboard a troop transport was rather interesting because they stack you 5 high. The canvas, piece of canvas laced in, and you use your life vest as a pillow. Land in Yokohama. Rather interesting because when we landed in Yokohama, there were only about 3 buildings standing. Most people don't realize that Yokohama was heavily bombed. So was Tokyo. They did more damage in Tokyo than they did either Nagasaki or Hiroshima. And you can see what looked like factory buildings. You get up close, that's all it was a shell, because they hit it with incendiaries. They also hit the palace grounds with incendiaries. You can see where they crossed the avenue right into the palace grounds from all the buildings that were burned out. So that I found that interesting. The other interesting thing about Nagasaki and Hiroshima, both of them were heavily Catholic populations. And yet we decided to nuke them. I'm very thankful, though, for Harry Truman, because I tell you, if it had not been for him, I'd probably be pushed up daisies in Japan. There's 21 miles between Yokohama and Tokyo. There were 21 miles of tunnels. When I got there, the coastal guns were still out on the shores. You could go up and rip the tar paper off in shiny metal. A lot of the pillboxes were still out there. The barbed wire was still out there. And but we spent a lot of time blowing up the tunnels. And that the people were quite hostile when we first got over there. You had to walk in pairs because they're not sure of the civilian population. And I became a member of the 7th Cavalry Regiment. That's the General Custer's outfit. And the interesting thing about the 7th Cavalry Regiment, they lost their colors at the Battle of Little Bighorn many years ago. Never got back into battle until Leyte down in the Philippines. They went on up into Tokyo. We were quartered in the Japanese Maritime Service Academy right on Tokyo Bay. I was in the 2nd Squadron. The 1st Squadron was just a few blocks down. But we were the only line outfit in Tokyo. General MacArthur originally brought the 11th Airborne in with him, and he had to ship them up into northern Hokkaido because they were kind of a rowdy bunch. He didn't like what they did when they got there. I won't go into detail, but they pulled him out and sent the 1st Cav in instead. There were 5,000 of us in Tokyo. We did most of the duty, including the guard of the Emperor's Palace. I was a member of that honor guard, and I'll be glad to give you a picture of that too, to show you. There were 11 gates in the palace. We were guarding the Emperor from his own people, because at that time they were rather hostile. That picture was taken when I was pulling guard duty. This big limousine pulled up in front of the gate. This priest gets out, comes over, wants to know if he can take my picture. I said, sure. And I didn't know who it was till a few weeks later. I get this picture, and it was Father Flanagan from Boys Town. He had stopped wanting to take pictures of us. The palace grounds is right down in the middle of Tokyo, and all the major parades were along that line. And when I stood out in front of that, MacArthur's limousine would come by and escort everybody to headquarters, and we were ordered, when he passed by, to salute, even though we couldn't see him. You could see his Cadillac with the flags on it as he passed by, so you present your arms to him. And every May, the communists would have the big parade. They come onto that palace ground, and you have to run them off down the street, blocks of them, trying to get rid of them. And then they'd come back again. So that's why we were there, though, to perform those kinds of duties. Well, when we first got over there, you know, they're pretty good about indoctrinating the troops, because we got there at our reception center in Japan before they shipped us out to the different divisions. We were given our protocol. We were there as representatives of the United States government. We were expected to act as such. You were to treat the Japanese in a polite way, no hostility, and go out of your way to avoid any conflicts. And they made that very strong. That's why we guarded his palace, see, because we were afraid that they were going to assassinate him. We guarded him to protect him from his own people. You sit there and you had these Buddhist priests who would come out in their yellow robes, standing at the gate, beating the tom-toms, but letting the emperor know that they were out there worshiping him. Now they outlawed the religion Well, I was there, but I'm not sure if he came back or not, or he was still, but I think we did a smart job. MacArthur, I give him credit. He recognized the emperor for what he was, and by protecting the emperor and holding him, we held the Japanese government together. And, you know, they were forced to give up the military. Now, they had quite a police force, well-trained police force, and they still do. You didn't horse around those guys. They may be a little bit, boy, they were great. The other thing is that I was amazed. You could be downtown Tokyo on Ginza Street, leave your billfold there, and they'd chase you 2 blocks to give it back to you. Personal possessions meant more to them than human life. We used to use the Japanese prisoners from the civilian prisons come over to do our KP for us. Get to talking to them, asking them, what did you do to get here? Well, one of them said, well, I killed my neighbor's wife. Well, how long are you here for? 5 years. Asked the next one, what are you in for? Well, I stole such to my neighbor. How long are you in for? Life. You know, being a young kid from Colorado, this was just an experience for me. I couldn't understand this. Joe and I, Joe Conley, and I had some friends that were in a rehab center over by Osaka, Japan. So we took off one day, took the train, went up through the Japanese Alps over to Osaka, and got off the train a couple times. And these Japanese had never seen GIs in uniform. They stared at us, didn't know who we were. But we got over there, these guys had this rehab center, beautiful hotel, just a small group of them. They're 100 miles from nowhere, running rehab for guys that had been rehabbing from the military. Before I met Joe, I was with Troop G of the 7th Cav Regiment. I was in the 2nd Squadron, and then I was assigned as a company clerk. They gave me my choice, either heavy weapons or company clerk. I said, fine, I'll go as company clerk. So I got off to really a nice deal to start with, because I had my own quarters. In fact, one of the guys I quartered with was our arms guy. He was airborne. He made the drop out of Corregidor. I met another guy who was, he hid out on one of the islands during World War II, and hid from the Japanese and acted as a forward observer for the military. You know, you were surrounded by people who had really been in it. And I remember teaching later on with a fellow who was a prisoner of the Japanese at Java. And later on, when they finally recovered him, he was on the docks working in Yokohama, spoke fluent Japanese, and he finally got released after all those years. And one of my neighbors where I grew up, he was a Marine. He made 5 assaults with Marines, including Iwo Jima. Never had a scratch. 5 assaults, you know, that's pretty lucky. It took a lot of guts. And to serve with people like that was quite an honor for me. Most people are not aware of what happened toward the end of World War II, and the fact that we almost had to invade Japan. If we hadn't, it would have cost the Japanese and us a lot of lives to take that real estate. It was tough terrain. It snowed, it rained. Japan had 4 rainy seasons. Each one consists of 3 months. I think Pearl Harbor. There was still damage in Pearl Harbor when I was there. And to think that we lost that many lives, and how close we came to being defeated. Thank God we had a few carriers sitting out there to help us. But yeah, they really took a beating. We've never wanted to occupy countries. We've always given it back. We take the country and then we give it back to them. In fact, we even helped them. Look what we did in Iraq. We went in there at our own money. We didn't make them pay for it. But look at the lives. I had relatives that served in that one too. And we've always just give us ground to bury our dead in. That's all we ever wanted. Well, I think it reinforced the fact that when I came stateside, and you've been out gone that long, and you're at night and you're approaching, and all of a sudden you come up over the horizon and there's the Golden Gate of San Francisco. What a sight. Boy, if that doesn't do something for you. To see that beautiful city by the sea and sailing. I've been under that bridge twice, but I've never been over until a few years later. I finally drove over. But that really impresses you. Well, of course, pulling guard duty sometimes can be rather scary. I pulled a lot of guard duty in along the bases there. And then during the May Day celebrations when you're downtown and you got to guard the troops, it can get kind of scary with the mobs. And then during the summer, MacArthur would have his 4th of July parade on the palace grounds, and all the European nations participate in that. That thing must last about 5 hours. It was quite spectacular to see all those troops, the Indian Gurkhas, with the turbans and all, prayed before him. So that was something. But at any one time, you never knew for sure what was going on. We were not sure where the Japanese were. You always felt like they were not laughing with you, but against you. It was a rather strange environment. I'm very thankful for my military service. I'm thankful for it for a number of reasons. I got my GI Bill out of it. It paid for my undergraduate. Well, of course, I belong to both the American Legion here and also the VFW. So I stay pretty much involved with both those organizations because they're great. They do a lot of good things, poppies, but they also back and they have a lot of activities going on to keep people reminded of the things that we've given the people being members of the service. So I'm still proud of my service. Oh, yeah, almost makes you want to cry. That flag means something, especially when you see it draped across coffins of military coming back and being buried with that. That's my hope, is to have a military funeral with my bagpipes playing Gary Owen. And I plan on being buried at the National Cemetery at Canton. I think it's a great place.